Joe Thomas here at the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC, here at Gaylord National Harbor on the Potomac, to differentiate it from all the other Gaylord National Harbor properties, I guess. It's easy for us in Charlottesville and Albemarle County because most times we know where we can find Jim Hingley and Joe Platania. But what about places where they don't know they have a Soros-funded, woke, progressive prosecutor? I'll use their word for it. Well, Cully Stimson from the Heritage Foundation has come up with a way to keep an eye on them. I don't know if he's got some sort of GPS tracking technology. I don't know if he's hacked into the Chinese Communist Party, because they, of course, know where their members are. Cully, good to see you. How are you doing, sir?
Delighted to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
So tell me about the rogue prosecutor tracker that you've started.
So I don't come to this as your average think tank, nerd, white paper writing person.
And God bless you for it, because I'm tired of them.
Well, they're my colleagues, and I love them all. I was a prosecutor in San Diego, a homicide prosecutor in Maryland, and then a homicide prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., and I served in the Navy for 30 years.
JAG school?
JAG, yeah. And so as a defense lawyer and judge, so I've seen all sides of the criminal justice system, and I became very concerned years ago that Soros was starting to directly fund DAs around the country, starting with Kim Foxx in 2015, with about $1 million in her race so she could win the primary in Chicago. And then the list has gone on and since then. And so since then, about 2020, my colleague Zach Smith and I, who is also a real prosecutor, have been writing about these pro-criminal, anti-victim zealots whose goal is to upend and dismantle the criminal justice system. Those are their words, not mine.
You know, it's interesting, when they started doing it, the left celebrated, oh, look, we can enact change for pennies on the dollar. All of a sudden, they got the fiscal conservative Jesus. They're like, oh, look, we can buy a prosecutor for much less than we have to buy a congressman, and if we commit voter fraud, the prosecutor won't do anything about it, allegedly. So, Cully, they started doing this, and then I guess they just kept upping the ante, and then you start getting the rhetoric of survival crime, and I won't prosecute theft up to this number, and then the number goes up to this number, and pretty soon, the poor communities are the ones that get decimated, because I know, I've never been wealthy. If somebody stole my car, I live a 25-minute drive from the radio station. I can't get to work if somebody steals my car. But these prosecutors shrug and say, oh, it's a 2003. It's not worth prosecuting or even going after this guy. How does the poor community support these people?
They don't, for the most part, because they're being impacted tremendously. And this movement, which is incredibly well funded, not just Soros, but Dustin Moskovitz from Facebook, Carrie Tuna, and other tech billionaires, realized something early on, and that is, and you hinted at it, and that is the prosecutor is the gatekeeper to the criminal justice system, not the mayor, not the city council, not the governor, not the police chief. If the prosecutor says we're not prosecuting, that's it. And so the playbook for these folks, and by the way, the other thing they realized is, since there's 2,300 elected DA offices around the country, and these are low visibility, low dollar races, the buy-in is nothing. Now in the bigger cities, when they shoved $1 million on the table in Chicago, that's the most money they'd ever seen in a DA's race. And so their playbook is as follows, which we've been writing about it at heritage.org. We have a Rogue Prosecutors splash page, and we have a book coming out in June on this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's going to be really good. 8 particular rogue prosecutors. Starts with real crime stories that would not have happened but for their policies. Their playbook is this. Don't prosecute any misdemeanors, period. Second, water down most felonies to misdemeanors. Don't add any sentencing enhancements or allegations whatsoever. So, by the way, I thought they were against guns, but they don't add gun allegations to people who commit crimes with guns. I mean, it's mind-boggling, isn't it? Don't prosecute any youths who are 16 and 17 who commit murder, child abuse, etc. in adult court. Don't ever ask for bail. Just let them walk out the back of the courtroom.
We saw how that worked in New York.
Right. And the list goes on and on and on. So this is not reimagining the criminal justice system, and this is not reform. This is prosecutorial nullification. That's what it is. And so it has resulted in a huge uptick in crime in the cities where you have this toxic trio of rogue prosecutor, defund the police, and demoralize the police. But don't buy the malarkey that crime is going up everywhere around the country. It's not. In the cities with real prosecutors like San Diego, Summer Stephan's the DA there, crime hasn't gone up, murders haven't gone up, robberies haven't gone up when you've had these police-involved shootings around the country. There were no riots, no stores, windows broken out, nothing. So we learned a lot during COVID. One of the things we learned is who you vote for your school board really matters.
Oh, yeah.
And now we're learning that who you vote for as DA matters for your public safety, because the real privilege, let's talk about real privilege. The real privilege is to live safely in your community.
Well, and to not be concerned that the drug gang is moved in and you're having shootouts. Now, Charlottesville, they love their gun-free zones. They love their progressive, we're Charlottesville. Very quietly, every second or third day, another shootout on the city streets. People in their parked cars getting shot. I mean, it's Charlottesville's come Chicago. And it's the drug gangs that are driving this. The police chief, our new police chief, says, we'll get the guns. Well, I can tell you where the guns are coming from. They're coming from the drug gangs who are putting them in the hands of their enforcers, their human resources department. If we're going to whistle past these graveyards and talk about legalizing, magic mushrooms and moving in hemp stores and marijuana stores into the poor neighborhoods, both real things in Virginia, they seem to be heading towards anarchy, Cully. Am I missing something, or am I overstating it?
You're dead on. And in fact, this is one of those strange public policy issues that doesn't divide neatly between red and blue or Democrat or Republican. Really what it divides between is law and order versus chaos. And so there are very good liberal Democrat elected DAs around the country. Jackie Lacey, the first black African-American woman, was the DA in LA County. 1,000 lawyers in that office, the biggest DA office in the country. But when she did not bend a knee to BLM, and she did not indict a police officer for a good shoot, by the way, the Soros machine came in, dropped $1 million on George Gascon, and beat her in the primary. And so when you have a candidate who talks about reimagining the criminal justice system and mass incarceration, which, by the way, does not exist.
Reformative justice and all that.
Yeah, 70% of the people who are in prison are there for violent crimes, and most of them have been involved in the criminal justice system with at least 12, 13, 14, 15 felonies under their belt. So they're not talking about second chances, okay? And this is not, there's nobody in jail for possession of marijuana, period. That's just a bunch of hooey, all right? And so I think you're starting to see people push back. San Francisco, 95% of the residents are registered Democrats. They kicked Chesa Boudin out in a recall election. Baltimore, which is not a Republican stronghold, in case you didn't know that, they just voted out Marilyn Mosby in the primary. She was the rogue prosecutor, and the recall against Gascon got 750,000 signatures to recall him. You saw Governor DeSantis boot Andrew Warren from office. He was a county DA who was enacting the Soros playbook. People are starting to wake up. Here's the sad irony of this movement. It's killing, literally, the very people they pretend to care the most about, black and brown people. And it's racist in its application and implementation, and it's failing, but not failing fast enough.
Well, that's where you see, like Steve Descano in Fairfax County, another one of those, had a longtime Democrat in Fairfax. They bring him in, he ousts them, heavily funded primary. Who gives money to primaries? But that's what they do, and they've led to this crime running rampant. You mentioned the demoralization of the police. So you talk about the city of Charlottesville is down 40% in its police department. It can't recruit. Why would you want that job? Everyone thinks you're the bad guy. Now the bad guys are actually shooting up their neighborhoods, and they're turning to the police saying, what gives? Why aren't you stopping it?
Right, and one of the other collateral and predictable consequences of this movement, especially when they don't prosecute 16 and 17-year-old 6'2" gang members in adult court for murder, rape, robbery, etc., is it becomes the Gang Recruitment Act, right? Because the gang members, the adults, say to the 16, 17-year-olds, hey man, just knock these two dudes off, boost this car over here. you'll do a little time if you get caught, usually you don't.
But you're one of our guys.
Right, and then you get the teardrop and you're set, man. You're good to go. By the way, Descano, with all due respect, is a putz. Okay, he's just
Is that a legal term?
It is. Look it up. It's in
the Bar Association.
Yeah, it's a Latin term. He's a putz, and so is the Loudoun County and the Arlington County Commonwealth's attorney. Descano, 72% of his haul came directly from Soros, so he is bought and paid for. You should read the stuff we've written about him on the Daily Signal.
Oh yeah, no,
He just dropped charges against a career convicted drunk driver, multiple drunk driving, against a soccer mom who was driving home from Mother's Day on the Beltway with her 3 kids and her puppy dog, and the guy T-bones her because she won't pull over. His car flips on the Beltway. His office, the woman almost died, okay? And his office doesn't contact her, doesn't let her know that they let him out of jail, doesn't inform her of the charges, doesn't send a victim witness person. 3 years later, last week, this public defender who now is working in his office, because real prosecutors have left his employment, informed her that we can't prove the case because it's a he said, she said. And they're like, what? There were all these people behind you on the Beltway who saw it. Beer bottles poured out of the guy's car when it flipped upside down. He's a career drunk driver. Right, there's police reports. He was on the lam for 8 hours. And yet this putz hires people like that. It's not funny. It's not funny.
But that's what we see. We see public defenders turning into these district attorneys. That seems to be where Soros is recruiting. He goes and finds some public defender and says, listen, I'll give you a lot of money once you become the DA, and then you can really defend the public,
right,
quote unquote.
Like Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. He got over $1.2 million. He had been a criminal defense attorney. That's a noble job. I was a criminal defense attorney. We need them.
Constitutional.
We need great defense attorneys. But there are people who are oriented to being criminal defense attorneys, and there are people who are oriented to being prosecutors. Some can do both well. I think I did. But here's Krasner. He sued the Philadelphia Police Department throughout his whole career dozens and dozens of times. Then he gets the Soros bucks, goes in, and then engages in prosecutorial nullification. And that's why the homicide rate has blown through the roof in Philadelphia. So it's carjackings. It's the carjacking capital of the United States now, by the way.
And that's a frightening thing. We've had several of those incidents happen in Charlottesville, reported as just skirmishes on the street. An attempted this, that, and the other thing. You can always read them in the paper. Cully Stimson, Rogue Prosecutor Tracker on the website. Read about it all, in the Daily Signal. When does the book come out about it?
The book comes out June 27th. The Amazon pre-order will be up soon, and we'll let you guys know about it so you can put it on your website.
Well, thank you so much for coming by. Thank you for doing this. So, we know where our rogue prosecutors are. Do you? That's at 10 o'clock, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your rogue prosecutor is?
Yeah, they're hanging out with their ACLU buddies in the criminal defense bar.
And do you know who the guy who tried to carjack you, where he is at 10 o'clock? He's back on the street.
Yeah, and the guy that did this to this soccer mom months later went out and did the same thing again, wasn't prosecuted to the full extent of the law. His license has been indefinitely suspended, and this is a guy who's still on the streets. He's going to kill somebody. And then what's Descano going to say?
He's misunderstood.
Right.
It's the school-to-prison pipeline or something like that.
Right, another one of these reimagining or mass incarceration blather words that the left and this movement likes to use.
Cully, thank you so much for what you do. I appreciate your visit here with us on Radio Row at CPAC, and have a good rest of the weekend.
Thank you for having me.